Go BG. Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo, the 10th largest Rotary Club in the world. Today we have Lee Strang with the Northwest Ohio Classical Academy. I'd like to ask Keith Burwell to come to the podium and deliver a reflection. Anna Collin will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then please stay standing for past President George Eistetter to lead us in the four-way test.
Keith is not here. Keith is not here.
Who's not here?
Would you ask Chuck Mann to do it, to go to the floor mic? Because Keith Burwell's not here. Sorry.
I've just been informed that Keith Burwell's not here, so Chuck Mann, our
I nominated him.
our holier than thou individual who will substitute
Sorry, Chuck.
in his place.
Sorry.
I'm tempted to do good bread, good meat, good God, let's eat. That's the first one that comes to this twisted mind. Let us pray. Thank you, Lord, for the food that was provided by the farmers that planted the seeds, by the people that harvested the food, the people that took it to market, the people that got it to the park inn, and the people that prepared it, and the people that served it to us. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact that there is a team of people that take your bounty and convert it to the sustenance that we need. Thank you for the day that we're having today. It may not be the most beautiful day that we have had or will have, but it's a better day than a lot of people around this earth are having. So we thank you for everything that you've given us, and hopefully the next time we need a speaker, someone to pray for us, someone will do better than I have done today.
Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Past President George.
First, is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Second, is it fair to all concerned?
Is it fair to all concerned?
Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Will it
Will be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. On the fly. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, George. Now is a good time to check into social media to let everybody know that you are at the 10th largest Rotary Club meeting in the world. And then after you check in, please put your cell phones away and enjoy the hour of Rotary. I'd like to thank this month's meeting sponsor, Spartan Chemical. Thank you very much, John Romer. So to introduce our visiting Rotarians, we have Wes Gridzion to come up and introduce our one visiting Rotarian.
President-elect Alex, we have one visiting Rotarian today. Visiting Rotarian, please stand as I read your name and remain standing until President-elect Alex welcomes you. Today we have Eric Kerfus from the Perrysburg Rotary Club with us. President-elect Alex, this is our visiting Rotarian.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Eric, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's program. Does anybody have any guests they would like to introduce? If so, please come to the floor mic to introduce your guests.
President Alex, I'd like to introduce my guest and colleague, Brad Smith.
Welcome.
President-elect Alex, I'd like to introduce Philip Bowles, Knight Insurance Risk Associate, and he is a prospective member.
And an ex-hockey player. Welcome, Philip.
President-elect Alex, I'd like to introduce Lynn Doty, the Director of the Better Business Bureau Ethics Program.
Welcome, Lynn.
President-elect Alex, my guest today is Roz Clemens. She's the Commissioner of the Housing Department at the Department of Neighborhoods, a prospective Rotarian. I've even dragged her to her first lead meeting an hour ago with Dick's leadership. So please welcome Roz Clemens to the community.
Welcome, Roz.
President-elect Alex, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Miller, no relation. He's a commercial realtor with JMS Real Estate.
Welcome.
Corner from the Toledo Ticket Company.
Welcome, Dave. Thank you, Jim.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce everyone to David Tackett, our Chief Mission Officer for Goodwill Industries of Northwest Ohio.
Welcome.
President-elect Alex, we have Pedro Furlan with us from Brazil. He's a guest for the third or fourth time, but I'd like to also encourage anybody who has any type of interest in sponsoring the next exchange student. This has been a phenomenal experience on all sides. So welcome, Pedro.
Pedro, welcome.
President-elect Alex, I'd like to introduce two people from my team at the Employers Association. Bob Bethel, our Vice President of HR and Learning Services, and Sarah Beddoes, our Marketing Coordinator.
Again, welcome guests and thank you for attending. Our Membership Development Committee has been very, very hard at work. Shireen Murad, Chair, Casey Hulk, Vice Chair, to keep us in the world's top 10 Rotary clubs. Our best new members come from our current members. Here to talk to you more about this year's new member initiative is Shireen Murad. Shireen, please come to the podium to explain how new members can help our club.
I'm going to try to do a good job today for you guys. We are going to talk about Suburban Bottle. We have a really, really, really good happy hour that's coming up. I see there's so many guests out there, and I know in the last 2 months you guys have all brought a lot of guests. So I would love to encourage you to bring all of these guests to this networking event. This event will give us the opportunity to get to know our guests and potential members, and then as well as that, it gives us an opportunity to get to know each other. So I know I get to know a lot of people from bowling and from euchre, from golf. However, these meetings don't allow us to get to know each other as well as we'd like to. So I'd love you guys to take this opportunity and come. So Suburban Bottle is this Thursday from 5:30 to 7:30. It's a wine tasting if you'd like to participate. If not, that's okay. But it's $15 at the door, and it does include the wine. And then you can bring absolutely anybody you'd like. And I encourage all of you guys to come. I know I see the same faces that help us. I know I see our committee, but I'd love to see some new faces up there as well. So the next slide we have is our word doodle that Andy Fox put together for us. This is something I just wanted to show you guys that I appreciate you. Everyone on this board, if you see your name, you have brought a guest. If you have your name bigger than most, then you've brought more than one guest, which I truly appreciate. So I'd like you guys to reach out to all of those guests and tell them how important it is to either be a part of Rotary if you think they're a potential member, or bring them to an event to see if they would be a good fit for us as well. All right, so this is the big moment for you. You guys don't know this is happening, but we are going to take a 3-minute time period today. And we there's a green napkin on everyone's table. It looks like that green napkin. It's a Hunter green napkin. So if everyone that has a Hunter green napkin can pull it up, maybe wave it around a minute. All right, good. We all know what green is. Congratulations. All right. You also have a Power of One brochure and index cards as well, and pens. So if everyone can take an index card, so the green person or green napkin person, the facilitator, sorry, of the group, would pass around your index cards. So on this index cards, it's very important. I only need 3 things. I need one potential name of someone that you think would be a good Rotarian. I need their email address or their contact number, one or the other. I really think email address might be easier. And I need your name so that I know who to contact if that name doesn't exist. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I do really want you guys to think. So we have three minutes, so this is plenty of time. I just need you to come up with one name. And if everyone comes up with one name that truly would be a good leader, a business leader in this community, so any owners, CEO, business managers, a good representation of Rotary is representing businesses in the community of all ages. They can be 30, 40, 50, 60, anywhere in between as well. All right, so when you guys are done, however, I need all of those index cards. So you're gonna give them back to your facilitator. You're also gonna give the pens back to the facilitator. And then when you're done and we're leaving this morning, you're gonna just leave them at the head table, facilitator table. All right, we have 3 minutes. I really would love if everyone did this. This is important for all of the Rotarians. So go.
Alex, I have a timer set. Okay, 3 minutes. Okay.
So we started at 10:50, but that'll work better.
Yeah, I'll just.
I thought I missed introducing people.
No,
You would have told
You're
me.
doing great.
You would have told me if
Yeah.
I did.
Hey, I'm gonna ring Keith Rowland's neck.
Okay, what?
Ring Keith.
Yeah, why do you do that? Not show up?
I sent everybody a confirmation. You're doing good.
Well, you know what? Chuck Man is what we're gonna start the meeting and end the meeting with Chuck Man. I gotta make a joke about that.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, you got everything right here.
Oh, yeah.
So that's it, and then this is what you get. They got a minute and a half.
Yeah, time is.
We have a non-participating team.
One minute left.
No.
Oh, you know what? It's on the screen too. Thank you very much for participating in this exercise and helping us with our membership development initiative. Next, I'd like to transition into a very, very important project that we have going, something that really makes a ton of sense. And the Disability Services Committee has approved this effort, and we're going to have Jack Hollister come up and provide us with an update about working better together.
Thank you, President-elect Alex. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. My name is Jack Hollister, and I have been a Rotarian since 2008 and president of the Employers Association since 1997. Today, I am standing before you as a representative of the Working Better Together, or WBT subcommittee, which is dedicated to working with fellow Rotarians to see at least 15 people with outstanding talent and some type of disability find active employment within our community. As Alex said, this work comes out of the Disability Services Committee and is an improved project of the Toledo Rotary Board. Briefly, I'd like to remind you of the presentation made November 24th to this committee. 4 outstanding organizations, the Ability Center, the Epilepsy Center, Goodwill Industries, and Lot Industries, have joined together to make employment of people with disabilities a high priority. Each of these organizations is represented in the Downtown Rotary by their respective CEOs, Tim Harrington, Roy Cherry, Amy Walkup, and Tim Menke. Their request to fellow Rotarians was to assist them in this pursuit. The Downtown Toledo Rotary has a long history of assisting those with disabilities to have the right medical, educational, and independent living resources to live a long and meaningful life. Finding traditional employment for this same group is the next opportunity, and the times we live in make now just the right time for this initiative. As the leader of the Employers Association with over 650 company members in Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan, I am intimately aware of the need for and shortage of great talent in our region. This talent need has resulted from a strong economy, great employers with great opportunities, and the high quality of life that we enjoy in this region. The national unemployment rate stands at about 3.5%, the lowest in 50 years. And the Ohio and Toledo regional unemployment stands at around 4%. So now, with traditional sources of talent less and less reliable, employers are ready and willing to entertain new ideas for finding and hiring their next team member. WBT is one of those ideas whose time has come. All 4 of these organizations work closely with their client base, talented individuals who are ready, able, and willing, and who are motivated to succeed because, quite frankly, they have not always been seen for who they really are. Fellow community members trying to grow, learn, live, and achieve like every one of us. Today, I bring you an easier process to help us all reach the goal of having 15 of our local disabled individuals employed by a Rotarian, or quite frankly, a friend of a Rotarian in the year 2020. The WBT subcommittee has worked to make it as easy as possible for you to participate when you have a job opening. All you have to do is reach out directly or have a member of your team that could be someone such as somebody in human resources, like a human resource manager, reach out directly to David Tackett of Goodwill Industries. Now, what we're supposed to have is a slide of David. It'll be up here in just a minute. Well, that's not it, but we might get there. Do we have another one? All right, well, David was introduced a little bit earlier by Amy, and I also say that David and his team will be here after the meeting. There's a table right outside in the lobby area right here. It says on it WBT, and it has the participating organizations right on the banner by the table. And what we would ask that you would do is to simply let David know of a job opening or a potential job opening and let them take it from there. They will help you find candidates, supply candidates to you, and they will also help you with any questions you may have during the process of interviewing, hiring, and onboarding the successful candidate. So as employers, you may also have concerns about what you might need to understand in order to work with people who have disabilities or to comply with the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Employers Association is going to support WBT by supporting you and your team and answering any questions you might have. Bob Bethel, who I introduced earlier, will be at the same table with David. If you have any questions for him or would like to have a resource to talk to later, he'll be able to give you his card. So what we're trying to do is make it as simple as possible for you. Again, if you have a job opening or you have something that you're anticipating, all you have to do is let David know. If you have questions about how to do it and you're concerned about that this might be a different experience for you as an employer, you can certainly talk to Bob. Our goal is clear. What we're trying to do is see 15 persons with disabilities employed by Rotarians or Friends of Rotarians in 2020. And so we ask you to consider this, and we've tried to make it as easy as possible. And so I thank you in advance for your support.
Thank you, Shireen. Thank you, Jack. Very important stuff. I'd like to, just a couple of quick announcements here. I'd like to reiterate Suburban Bottle coming up on the 30th, right? Thursday? Give me some support there, somebody. Okay, good. So there was a link today when you received, here, let's bring these down a little bit. When you received your, the information about today's meeting, there's a link to RSVP to Suburban Bottle. Also would like to mention that in that same email, there is a link to a survey. So we put together a survey for members because your feedback is very important to us and how we operate or how we continue to get involved with different aspects within the club. So your feedback is important. Please, noon on Tuesday is the deadline for that. So, and then finally, we have a couple members that are a little bit under the weather, Dick Anderson and Gary Murphy. We have cards on the Rotary table. If you have not signed them yet and you wish to sign them, please do so. And now, we would like to have Anna Cullen come up, member since 2013, who works at Fifth Third Bank, to introduce new member Kate Fineski.
I'm going to put it up.
Please.
Doesn't work that same way. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks, President-elect Alex. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you our newest member of Toledo Rotary, Kate Fineski. Although many of you in this room have known either Kate or her husband, Adam, for years now, somehow our paths had never crossed. That was until I received a message on LinkedIn from Kate introducing herself in her new position as the Director of Communications and Development for the National Museum of the Great Lakes. As many of you know, it was my privilege to serve in that role for the museum for 6 years, from before its introduction to the Toledo community until last spring when I accepted the position of the Marketing Director for Fifth Third Bank here in Northwest Ohio. Leaving such an outstanding organization was a tough decision, but upon meeting Kate, And witnessing her enthusiasm for our community and her excitement to take the museum into the next stages, I knew that there was no better person to be sitting at the helm than Kate Fineski. We have since become fast friends, and I'm excited for her and for all that is in store for the museum in the coming years. So as I mentioned, Kate is the Director of Communications and Development for the National Museum of the Great Lakes. She has over 20 years of experience in the communication, education, and not-for-profit leadership. Switch. She has an undergraduate degree in graphic design, marketing, and communications, and graduated summa cum laude with her MBA from Lourdes University just this past December. Professionally, she began her career in advertising and worked at Hart Associates. Later, she began a design and communication consulting firm. She's passionate about philanthropy, and for the past few decades has worked to bridge her communication work with the not-for-profit operations, working for the National Association of Mother Centers, Momentum, is that how it's pronounced? Most recently, she served as the Vice President of Engagement and Brand Strategy for the United Way of Greater Toledo. Personally, Kate is active on many community boards and lives with her husband, Adam, and their 3 children in Sylvania. So if you could, please join me in welcoming Kate Fineski to Toledo Rotary.
Welcome to Rotary, Kate. We look forward to your involvement and leadership within our club. And now, I'd like to have John Federke, who's been a member since 2007, come up to the podium to introduce our speaker, Lee Strang, with the Northwest Ohio Classical Academy.
Well, between you two, there's no way to find the right mic heights here. President-elect Alex and fellow Rotarians, it's my pleasure today to introduce Lee Strang, who is a founder and board president of the Northwest Ohio Classical Academy, which promotes classical education. The mission of Northwest Ohio Classical Academy is to train the minds and improve the hearts of young people through a rigorous, content-rich classical curriculum in the liberal arts and sciences, one that produces thoughtful leaders and virtuous citizens. Lee is a graduate of Harvard Law School and an expert in classical education and its benefits to communities. Lee is also the author of Originalism's Promise, a natural law account of the American Constitution, and he has written numerous articles and publications regarding the Constitution. Lee has volunteered for several organizations, including the Boy Scouts of America and Central Catholic High School. He lives in Berkey, Ohio, with his wife Elizabeth and their 7 children. So let's welcome Lee Strang. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Anybody else from Berkey out there? No, that's not unusual. So thank you, John, for inviting me to the 10th largest Rotary Club in the country, and Walter for getting us set up. In the world, I'm sorry. Thank you, President-elect Alex, for that. I was just going to say that you guys run a very tight ship, and this is evidence of that tight ship. And also, I was thinking this morning, as I was reading more about Rotary Club, that in a time of political polarization and going through the 4 points that you all did when you started your meeting is certainly an excellent organization in a time where people are torn apart for lots of reasons. And Rotary Club is one of those places where people of goodwill with different views can come together and do good for the community. So I really appreciate being invited to learn more about your organization today. And thank all of you for coming today to learn about classical education in Northwest Ohio Classical Academy. My goal this afternoon is to provide you with a brief overview of classical education's benefits to our community's children, including my own children. John gently mentioned that we have a number of children. And I'm sure that you'll have some questions that I won't be able to answer in my initial remarks, so we'll save time for question and comment period as well. So the folks that brought classical education are on the board. These are Northwest Ohio Classical Academy is a colloquially known as a charter school. It's a community school. And so the Board of Trustees is the governing body of the organization. And their view is that they're the ones who are passionate about
and want to preserve the mission of providing classical education for children in our area. Their mothers and fathers, grandfathers and grandmothers, businessmen, teachers, doctors, and I'm saving the best of the last, there's a lawyer on the board as well. All of whom have given their time, their talent, and their treasure to bring classical education to the children of our area, including my own children. We have 3 children currently there. We also have our founding principal, Mr. Philip Schwank. Mr. Schwank has decades of administrative experience and teaching experience in a variety of schools. In classical education, my impression is that many of you have maybe heard of the phenomenon, and I'm going to start with the baseline that most of you have just heard of the phenomenon. And so when you think about trying to hire a school administrator where you need decades of public school experience by definition is typically not going to be classical school experience. And so it was very challenging for us to find somebody with the experience to start a new school who also was knowledgeable about and passionate about our mission to provide classical education. And let me just give you one anecdote because I've been so impressed with Mr. Schwank over the past 6 months as our school has been going. So one of the things that we do in every board meeting every month is we ask Mr. Schwank, give us an update about how you're helping through your leadership build a classical school culture. And one of the things that Mr. Schwank related at one of our meetings was a routine which we have is a morning ceremony. So the morning ceremony is a lot like the one that you all did with a Pledge of Allegiance. And then the thing that Mr. Schwank had identified at one of our meetings was on the anniversary of the Gettysburg Address, a number of students who had memorized the Gettysburg Address stood up after the morning exercise and gave a little bit of background and then recited the Gettysburg Address, wrote from memory. And they did it excellently. So if you go to our Facebook page, that's one of the videos that's up there. And Mr. Schwank has been somebody who's cultivated that mission. So this afternoon, I'm going to briefly talk about Northwest Ohio Classical Academy and then why I think classical education is great, not just for our students, but for many, if not most of the students in our area. So our mission is to partner with parents to help them raise their children to be thoughtful leaders and virtuous adults. And we do that through primarily our content-rich classical education curriculum. So if you're like me and you've had your children in a variety of different schools, that my bet is that you've never seen the school's curriculum. And in fact, when our children were at a school, I'm a fan of history. And so I said, can I see what the kids are going to learn when we put our kids in your school? And the principal said, well, I don't really have a document that I can give you. I said, well, can you at least give me history, the history class? What are they going to learn in history class? Because I'm a history buff. And she didn't have that either. But one of the things that that sets us apart is that this curriculum, which was developed through the Hillsdale College faculty in consultation with national experts, takes our students from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And let me just give you one example about what I think makes our curriculum unique. And I'm going to say some other things later. In 12th grade, our students do a senior thesis. So they take the semester in English class and they find a topic that they're going to research. They spend the semester researching it, writing about it, rewriting about it, and then they do an oral presentation. If you're like me, you may have done a thesis in college, but our students by 12th grade have written a substantial work of research and writing and presented it to the faculty and to the students. And we also partner with our parents in an additional way. We don't charge tuition because we are a public charter school. Northwest Ohio Classical Academy resides in our wonderful building on 5025 Glendale Avenue, just east of Reynolds Road. It has all the amenities of a school, including a gym, a cafeteria, and art room. It has 14 classrooms to accommodate our growth. We're currently K through 8. We're going to grow K through 12, and plenty of land to grow further. And just this last month, Northwest Ohio Classical Academy held its first annual holiday concert in our newly updated auditorium. And I have to say, it was awesome. And I didn't go into it feeling that way. I went into it feeling kind of pensive because you had 210 students all there. And I thought to myself, are we really going to have them all on the same page throughout the hour plus holiday concert? And they did. And when I asked parents afterwards, what did they think? 201, the parents said that they expected something like this 3 or 4 years down the road, but they were delighted and surprised that within 4 months, we were able to put an excellent holiday concert on for those children and their families. Our founding faculty consists of people with a variety of experience. Let me just give you a sampling of 3 of our faculty members. Mr. Kelleher. Mr. Kelleher is one of many of our teachers who are graduates of Hillsdale College. I'm going to talk more about a relationship to Hillsdale in a little bit. Mr. Kelleher has a Bachelor of Arts and then a Master's in Classics. And Mr. Kelleher gives a little bit of reasoning for why he majored in classics, but the basic theme is that He is passionate about Latin and Greek and those cultures. And so Mr. Kelleher is our history teacher, but he's also our dean of students. And I'll tell you why. So when we were interviewing, we had a variety of interviews and different interview experiences. And Mr. Kelleher, we finished the interview questions and we did the stock, do you have any questions for us? But Mr. Kelleher did not play it safe. Mr. Kelleher asked us a question, and it was a stumper. He said, what have you all done and what do you plan to do to build, not just theoretically and in the curriculum, a classical culture for your faculty and students, but what are you planning to do in practice? And we turned to each other and we said, boy, we really hadn't thought that far ahead. And so he had been thinking as an interviewee about this place where he would like to teach and be a member, and not just like a day job, but a place where he could flourish as a person committed to offering this excellent education. Anna Myers is Northwest Ohio Classical Academy's kindergarten teacher. She brings over 20 years of teaching experience through classical education. And she was somebody where when we did after the interview, her personality is so bubbly, her personality is so contagious that and I tend to be a very calm person. I turned to my colleagues who were interviewing and I said, wow, she was an amazing person. And that personality makes her an excellent kindergarten teacher. One of my children is actually with Mrs. Myers in kindergarten. Mr. Varney is our Latin teacher. Mr. Varney was literally a Cold Warrior, so he studied languages, and during the Cold War, he was a Czech translator in a secret undisclosed location. And Mr. Varney has been teaching Latin and Greek and other classical languages for a long period of time. And I don't know how many of you took Latin. I didn't take Latin. I tried to study it a little bit, but Latin is not the subject where you think students would want to have that class or that teacher. But in fact, my son, who had taken Mr. Varney for Latin a couple of years earlier, heard that we had hired Mr. Varney to be our Latin teacher, and he said to me, quote, Mr. Varney was my favorite teacher. And I thought, wow, if a person can say that a Latin teacher was their favorite teacher, then he must be a really good teacher, and he has turned out to be good as well. So Northwest Ohio Classical Academy, we opened this last fall. It's our first semester. We have approximately 210 students, K through 8. We have excellent academics, which I'm going to describe more briefly. We have a vibrant PTO. We had our first PTO meeting in September, and since it was a new school, it wasn't clear how many people are going to show up. But actually, the room was full. The cafeteria was full of people wanting to volunteer and to contribute. And the PTO has been very gracious and generous with their time, talent, and treasure by supporting the teachers. So for example, during parent-teacher conferences, which at our school run for 2 days, where the parents sit down and spend a lot of time with each teacher, the PTO provided meals for the teachers, so that way they wouldn't have to worry about where they're going to get their food. And our parents have been delighted with their first semester as well. So Michael and Anastasia Desmond, one of the things that they like best about classical education is something called table talk. So if you're like me, when you have family dinners, one of my goals as a father is to try and help us have a family conversation, one that kind of helps our kids know what it's like growing up and what they should do when they're adults. And it's frankly been a struggle. And one of the things that Northwest Ohio Classical Academy has helped us as parents do is they give our children assignments, table talk. And so the children will come home and there'll be a question that will be the topic of conversation at dinner time. And so, for example, just last week, our daughter Lucy, who's in 8th grade, her topic of conversation was, what was something that happened to you that was unusual? And unusual could be good or it could be bad, and you learned a lesson from that. And it was a great experience because my wife and I were both sitting back and thinking through all the things that have happened to us. And also, it was a great experience as a father because I was able to give my children, I gave them an example, which I won't share here, of an experience that was actually a negative lesson. Like I learned, don't do that in the future. And so it opened that opportunity in kind of a good context to teach my kids a life lesson. The Wright family have a number of children in our school. One of them is in kindergarten. Our other kindergarten section is Mrs. Ryan. And just like the experience that my wife and I have had with our teachers who are committed to being masters of the subject and role models, the Wright family has as well. Many of you are probably familiar with Hillsdale College. If you're like me, one of the things that you know about Hillsdale College is that it's committed to academic excellence. And we're affiliated with Hillsdale in something called the Barney Charter School Initiative, where Hillsdale College gives us, for example, the curriculum, which they drafted and crafted. They give us access to a network of potential teachers. So for example, we're going up to Hillsdale College to a hiring fair just in 2 weeks to hire for our 9th grade class that we're going to be entering next year. They give us access to a network of potential administrators that they help hire us. But I think really most importantly, they give us a lot of advice. And so, for example, Hillsdale College is sending down a team to sit in with our teachers, watch the teachers, talk with the teachers, talk with the students, talk with parents over this week to find out how things are going. Where are areas where we can improve to meet Hillsdale's standard of excellence? And I'd like to give just a brief video that Hillsdale has created to describe classical education in the Barney Charter School Initiative.
In public education, there are a lot of different ideas about what the purpose of education is. If you ask any student or even a lot of parents, they immediately start talking about getting a job, security for the future, and kids will say the purpose of education is to get rich. That sounds good on the surface, but what it yields is an education system that asks sixth graders to figure out what they're going to be when they grow up. And so you get schools where teachers are there to sort of supervise and guide, but not to teach directly.
As a mother, I wanted much more than that for my children. I didn't want them to go through an education system. I wanted them to be educated.
If you come to one of the Hillsdale classical schools, you will see all kinds of things going on that just don't go on in public schools anymore. In a Hillsdale Classical School, we are training the minds and the hearts of our students. We're training them to think well, and we're training them to love the right things. We want our students to learn to be virtuous people, and we want them to be knowledgeable people, and we want them to spend their lives pursuing the good.
Even if we produce students who don't know everything, if we produce students who have the disposition to continue learning and teaching themselves and pursuing knowledge, then we've done a good job.
There you go. Good morning, guys. Sometimes people think that classical education is really elite and fancy and only for a certain group of students. And that's not true. If you look at the history of education in this country, you see that a couple generations ago, everyone was learning to diagram sentences. Everyone was learning cursive. Lots of people were learning Latin.
There's a difference, of course, between the great minds that we study and ourselves. But it's not that the great minds are the only ones who can understand these things. We can too. The difference is the great minds are the ones who first saw it. I could never do the things Newton did. I could never do the things Einstein did. I could never discover those. But once they've been discovered, I can read what they've done and I can follow it and I can understand it. And everybody can.
It doesn't take a super high SAT score to be able to study Latin.
Classical education cannot be exclusive and it cannot be elitist. If classical education does what it says it does, which is educate the person in terms of human nature, then by virtue of attempting to perfect human nature, it is for everyone.
So for many of you, you've probably heard a little bit about classical education. And what I want to do now is I want to spend a little bit of time describing classical education's key components in a little bit more detail. But stepping back for a moment, let's think about what the stated goals of nearly all schools in Ohio are. And Ohio follows the Common Core curriculum, which you may recall from about 10 years ago was a point of contention in Ohio and in the US. And if you look at the bottom below the title, the mission statement of the Common Core curriculum is college and career ready. These are good and valuable goals. I want my children to have fulfilling college experiences and careers, but college and career isn't the whole of my children, and therefore it can't be the whole of our education. And classical education sees your children as more than economic actors. It sees us as human beings who fall in love, who get married, raise families, worship God, serve their country, cultivate friendships, and so much more. And Northwest Ohio Classical Academy's curriculum sees your children and other people's children on the road to becoming free and happy adults. And that's a noble purpose through our content-rich classical curriculum. And there are three components I want to identify briefly. One is the knowledge, second is the skills, and the third is the character to flourish as free and happy adults. So first, classical education provides the knowledge necessary for young people to flourish as free and happy adults. It's a liberal arts curriculum. I'm just going to give you the smallest sampling of what our children learn at Northwest Ohio Classical Academy. Our students learn about historical events, characters, stories, fables, scientific facts, mathematical proofs. So for example, in 8th grade, our daughter Lucy went through that this fall. They read the text of the Constitution. Now, that may not be surprising to you, but it should be surprising to you because every year when I teach constitutional law to my introductory law students, these are folks who've already had college, I always say, how many of you have read the Constitution? And out of 92, 93 students, 5 have, 6 have. So in 8th grade, our students read the text of the Constitution, but not just the text of the Constitution and then move on. What they do is they ask, and the teacher asks, Mr. Kelleher asks, what is it that makes the American Constitution distinct from other constitutions? Why do we have the Constitution that we have with built-in things like separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism? And so our students read the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers were the series of newspaper articles written by James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay, arguing in favor of the adoption of the Constitution. And Federalist 10, our students read in 8th grade. And what James Madison argued is that given the way human beings are made, and Madison's argument was that sometimes we're capable of great good, but we're often capable of less noble activities as well, that our Constitution has built into it checks and balances on the people who are going to be in governmental power. And our students read the Constitution and the surrounding documents for that purpose. Our students read entire literary works in great depth and learn how to apply them. So for example, if you're like me, you may have read Romeo and Juliet in high school. You may have read it in college, which I did as well, but our students read it in 8th grade. And they read it for the purpose that Shakespeare wrote the story. So here's the conventional view about Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare was describing a story of 2 young people who were meant to be together and whose family and whose church and whose culture prevented them from the happiness and ended up in tragedy. But Shakespeare's story is actually 180 degrees the opposite. What Shakespeare was arguing is that young people who have a goal, who don't listen to their family or their church and their community, end up in tragedy. And our students learn what Shakespeare actually meant them to learn. Or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If you're like me, I actually did not read, I'm ashamed to say, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in high school or college. I just read it on my own later. And the story about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is about Dr. Jekyll who wanted through chemical means, through technology, to be able to put that bad part of human nature into a bottle and keep it separate. But if you've read the story, you know the moral to the story, right? Which is that technology alone won't help us, given our human natures, stay on the good and the true. And in the end, Mr. Hyde ends up taking over Dr. Jekyll. And so our students in literature are learning the same lessons they learn in, for example, history class. We have a robust Latin program beginning in grade 3. My daughter Lucy, when she was studying Latin roots, which is what we started in grade 3, my daughter Lucy came to me one night and said, she was doing her spelling words, Dad, how do you spell astronaut? And if you think about how you would spell it using normal English phonetics, it would be A-S-T-R-O-N-A-U-G-H-T. And so I was going to answer my daughter Lucy. My answer was actually going to be, go look in the dictionary. But before I said that, Lucy said, never mind, Dad, I've got it. And I said, well, what do you mean you have it? And she said, because she had been doing the Latin roots, she was able to spell it. Because astronauts, 2 Latin words are astra and nauta, star sailor, or star as somebody sailing towards the stars. And nauta is N-A-U-T-A. And so she knew how to spell astronaut without having to go and resort to the dictionary. Beginning in kindergarten, our students used the best math program in the world, which is Singapore math. If you're like me, you don't know much about math, or Singapore, maybe you don't know much about math either. But the one thing I do know about Singapore, which happens over and over, is that in the annual surveys of nations who do well or not well on math, science, and other subjects, Singapore is the top or near the top every year. So second, classical education provides children with the skills they need to be free and happy adults. We provide students with an opportunity to develop the skills of effective reading, research, writing, and oral expression. So one of my jobs as a law professor is to help guide my students in writing 12 to 14-page papers. And I always ask them, have you written a paper that long before? And thankfully, the answer is yes, most of them have, but a significant minority had not written a 10-page paper all the way through college. Remember before I mentioned our senior thesis? Every student who goes to Northwest Ohio Classical Academy is writing a substantial piece of writing by 12th grade. And so that's preparing them for the skills that they're going to need in the workplace and elsewhere. Third, Northwest Ohio Classical Academy is looking at character formation. And character formation is necessary to flourish as free and happy adults. So for example, our students, not just in English and not just in history, are going to learn about character formation. They're going to learn it from when they study, for example, Roman history. My son Alex is somebody who had always loved history, And when he started studying Roman history, remember one night at supper, I'd said, Alex, did you learn anything interesting today? And he lit up because he had read about Horatius at the bridge. Horatius was one of the Romans who had defended the bridge, allowed the Roman army to get inside the walls of Rome while the enemy was there. So he stopped the enemy. And Alex not only learned the fact that Horatius had done that, but was inspired by the virtue of courage that Horatius had exemplified. So our curriculum throughout focuses on building character. As a way to concretely see how classical education is different from conventional education, think about technology. At both public and private schools, schools aim for what is called one-to-one technology. Each child gets a laptop or an iPad or some other electronic device. By contrast, Northwest Ohio Classical Academy uses technology as a tool. Technology does not dominate. So think about these three classrooms. Which of the classrooms is a classical classroom? In classical classrooms, the teacher leads the students because the teacher is not only the master of the subject, the teacher is also a role model for the students. The students and the teachers interact with each other in a joint and orderly and joyful pursuit of knowledge. By contrast, in conventional education, teacher is not the leader. The students don't interact with the teacher or themselves. Instead, they work by themselves. They, quote, teach themselves through a heavy use of technology. When you look at NOCA's classrooms, they're joyful and orderly learning environments. Here is kindergarten, run by Mrs. Myers. Here is 8th grade, run by Miss Spalding, who is our literature teacher. So Miss Spalding here is teaching the students To Kill a Mockingbird. Most of us have probably read that. So my wife and I were on our 8th grade daughter, Lucy's case. You gotta read To Kill a Mockingbird, gotta read To Kill a Mockingbird. And she didn't want to have anything to do with it. So in 8th grade, they read it, and Lucy was captured by the story. In fact, so much that when she was reading it, she came home one night and said, I'd like to spend a family movie night watching To Kill a Mockingbird. So you might say, those are some nice videos, and that was a nice video. Or you might say, I might want my kid to learn a little bit of Latin, but do I really need them to start in 3rd grade? And how do you know classical education really works academically? Does it provide academic excellence? Classical education has been in the US for around 40 years, and that's long enough for there to be built up a track record of academic excellence. Let me just give you two key examples. First, Hillsdale Academy, which is located in predominantly rural with a sizable poor population of students that uses our curriculum, has never scored below the 97th percentile on the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. And at the high school level, these amazing results continue. For example, the Willows Academy in Des Plaines, Illinois, the average for the students is 26.5 on the ACT. There are some studies about classical education and its efficacy. One of my favorites is a study by a person who was in seminary to become a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod pastor. And if you know anything about the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, they have the 2nd largest parochial school system in the country. And he looked out and he saw that the K through 8 schools in the Lutheran community were divided into two groups. There were those with the conventional curriculum and those with the classical curriculum. And he studied the educational outcomes based only on standardized tests. And here's what he found. At kindergarten level, the conventional Lutheran school scores were slightly above the classical Lutheran school scores. By 4th grade, they had equalized, and by 8th grade, same pastor, same theology, same basic church structure. The only thing that was different was the classical curriculum. The classical school scores were 20% higher on average than the conventional Lutheran school scores. And so I see that I'm running out of my time, and luckily, I'm done with my remarks as well. And so what I've argued this afternoon is I've tried to introduce you to classical education, which I think is different in 3 key ways: in the knowledge it tries to provide to its students, in the skills it tries to provide to its students, and in the character formation to help students be free and happy adults. Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll open for a few questions.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I'm curious, in this day and age where the social media are so invasive of the thoughts of young people and actually up and down the spectrum, what do you do to provide guidance so that our students and young people really develop their critical thinking skills and know how to master the usage of social media?
Thank you for that question. And social media is a challenge in a lot of ways to helping young people grow. And I think there's a couple ways I'd like to respond. So first is that we spend a lot of time on character formation. One of the important virtues, in fact, the virtue that our school is working on this month is self-government. Self-government means doing things in the appropriate amount. And so I think that means for most Americans, when they become mature adults, is it's not that you have zero social media, but that you utilize it in a prudent way, in a reasonable way. So our curriculum itself builds in focusing on helping students know what a reasonable amount of each particular thing is. Second, we use a modest amount of technology in our classroom. And so what we do is we help students become delighted, not with whatever, if somebody's liked my picture or if somebody is saying something about me in a positive way. What we want students to do is we want them to love knowledge and love learning and love conversation. And I just point you to one of our sister schools, another BCSI school in Golden View, Colorado, has a great video called Why Pencil and Paper? And what you see are testimonies, among other things, from students there, high school students, who talk about what it's like to be in a learning environment that's technology free. And what it does is it frees them from what they would otherwise be attached to focus on To Kill a Mockingbird, to focus on the conversations they have with their other students. So our goal is to try and provide character formation, so that way when they are exposed and are to social media, they do it in a prudent way over time. Thank you for that question.
I was an English teacher for many years at the secondary level. One of the things that overwhelmed me in your presentation was the almost exclusively white, Anglo-Saxon, whatever you want to call it, both in terms of student body representation as well as your literature. I saw no reference at all to anything that wasn't that. I didn't see Elie Wiesel, I didn't see Toni Morrison, I didn't see Maya Angelou, I didn't see Lady Murasaki Adichie. Where do you address the broader world that is much more representative than just the white
Sure. Well,
perspective?
Thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Let me say a couple of things. So classical education and the Barney Charter School Initiative focuses on the Western tradition. And the Western tradition originated in Greece and Jerusalem and in Europe. So it wouldn't be surprising that people from, for example, England, Shakespeare, would be writing some of the literature that we cover. But that focus doesn't exclude other coverages as well. So for example, one of the writers, which I didn't mention, that's just because of my knowledge base, is Toni Morrison. So our students in English class do read Toni Morrison as one of many examples. Or art. So one of the things I love doing before I do a presentation is I actually will flip through and just randomly look at a page and see what the kids are reading or studying at a particular year. And they have a section, for example, on African art. They have a section on the history of India. And in fact, my daughter Lucy was just covering some of that as well. So we focus on the Western tradition. The Western tradition is capacious in lots of ways, but it's not to the exclusion of other cultures and other histories and other art forms. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much for that fantastic presentation. To show you our appreciation, the Toledo Rotary Club Foundation will make a donation to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund in your name. We would also like to present you with this book on Toledo's history.
Well, thank you very much. I love history.
We knew that. So, next week, our next meeting, February 3rd, Rossford Mayor Neil McKinnon, as our speaker, will share information about the local growth of Rossford and the positive economic impact on its expansion. So there are two meetings today. Membership development will be in the North Cape room, and the vocational service committee will meet in the Board of Governors room. And I'm a little bit apprehensive to end a meeting with the same person that started the meeting, or almost started the meeting. Chuck?
We're going to have a chat after the meeting, President-elect Alec. A new teacher was trying to make use of her psychology courses. She started her class by saying, "Everyone who thinks that they're stupid, stand up." After a few seconds, little Harold stood up. And the teacher said, "Harold, do you think you're stupid?" "No, ma'am, but I hate to see you standing there all by yourself."
Thank you, Chuck. Have a great week, everybody. We are adjourned.